Okay, so for the first question, if we look at this logical expression, we will see an or symbol in the middle of the expression. So that basically tells us that the circuit has to be split into two parts, which is the top half and then the bottom half. So for the top one, you can see here that we for the first half of the expression, we have P or R and Q or R. So for the first part, which is P or R, we will draw those two in parallel in a box and in parallel to each other. And then there's an and, so which means that the next part has to be in a straight line after it. So basically after the box, and then the next part, which is Q or R, so we draw the same thing, another box, and then Q or R, so parallel to each other. So for the bottom half, we have P and negation Q and R. So when these are all joined by and symbol, we can just draw it as one straight line. So we can just line up P, negation Q, and R all in one row, in one line. So lastly, we just connect both of those top half and bottom half with point A and point B.
Assalamualaikum and good morning. Today I'm going to explain how to simplify this logical expression for question 2. Our goal is to use the law of logic to turn this long equation into a simple form. As you can see, we have two main parts here separated by an OR operator. Okay, first let's focus on the left side of the bracket. So we apply the distributive law, which works like an expanding algebraic brackets. We multiply every term in the first group by every term in the second group. This gives us four new terms: P and Q, P and R and Q, and finally R and R. So next, to simplify, look at the term R and R. According to the adaptation law, stating the same thing twice is redundant. So R and R just become a single R. This helps us clean up the equation. Now for the important parts, we have a single R, but we also have P and R and Q and R. Next to it, we can use the absorption law. This law basically says that if you have a plane R connected by an OR, it absorbs any other terms that also contains R. So P and R and Q and R get absorbed by a single R. We apply the same rule to the second big bracket at the end, P and not Q and R. Since it also contains an R connected by an N, the main R absorbs the entire bracket too. Okay. So once the R has absorbed all those extra terms, we are left with just the first term, P and Q, and the single R. So our final simplified expression is P and Q or R. Okay.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Haris Terry bin Muhammad Nasir. Today I will be answering question 2. The situation is a university student wants to pass a subject. Passing the subject depends on completing all assessment, fulfilling attendance requirement to be eligible to sit for the final examination, and passes the final examination. Then the student pass the subject. Next, we move on to primitive preposition. The first is variable P, which is the student fulfills the attendance requirement. Next, variable Q. The student is eligible to sit for the final examination. Next, R. The student passes the final examination. S. The student completes all assessment. And lastly, variable T. The student passes the subject.
Okay, now I'm going to break down the premise of the question and the conclusion to our argument. Premise is essentially a statement we assume to be true, and our goal is to see if this leads us logically to our final result. Okay, let's look at the first two conditional rule. Premise 1 states if the student fulfills attendance requirement, which is P, then they are eligible for exams, which is Q. And we write this as if P, then Q. Okay, so and then premise 2, which state that if they are eligible to sit in the exam, which is Q, then they pass the exam, which is R. So we write that as if Q, then R. Okay, next, which is premise 3, which combines two conditions. If the student passes the exam and completes all assessment, which is R and S, then they pass the subject, which is T. And then we write this as R and S if, and then T. And then finally, we have two facts for this specific student. Premise 4, for premise 4, they did fulfill attendance, which is P, and premise 5, and they did complete all assessment, which is S. So the conclusion for this for this question is that the student passes the subject, which is T. Okay, then I will let Farish handle the rules of interference to prove that this logic actually holds up.
Assalamualaikum everyone. So I'm going to be explaining about the to improve that the argument is valid by using the rules of inference. So first we have premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, premise 4, and premise 5. So premise number 1 we have if P then Q. Premise number 2 we have Q if Q then R. And then if R and S then T. Then we have P and S. So we apply modus ponens on premise number 1 and 4, we get Q. And then for number 7, we apply modus ponens on 2 and 6, where we get R. And then we apply conjunction on 7 and 5, which is why we get R and S. And then we apply modus ponens on 3 and 8, that's why we get T. Therefore, the student passes the subject. Thank you. That's all.